In the United States' long history of toppling governments, which includes more than 50 since the Second World War, it has consistently combined militant actions with psychological warfare in what we might call the 1-2 punch of empire. The war for hearts and minds, as innumerable internal documents attest, is a foundational aspect of U.S. empire building. Which, I don't know about y'all, I could put a number on it. Give me a few days and I could put a number on it.
Mm.
What does mean, oh, what does mean? How are the union and the socialist mean? Everything I can read, oh, I need, oh, I need, oh, I need, oh, what does mean? Oh, what does mean? Oh, what does mean? Oh, what does mean?
Welcome back to Workers Lit, y'all's favorite podcast about the fight for the narrative. Folks, just right at the top, it's getting heavy. It's looking like we're going to enter a no-fooling shooting war with Iran. There are a couple of carriers in Iranian waters and in the Mediterranean, hundreds of planes converging on that area, all to knock out a geopolitical rival in the name of our continued genocidal outpost Israel. You know the drill. Now, bourgeois media would have you believe that the Gerald R. Ford is docking Crete to back this whole thing up. Jen, of course, this is not true. You were successful in sinking the Gerald R. Ford a few months back by drilling holes in its hull.
True.
I have access to drone footage of the Gerald Ford in port at Crete. If you look at the side of the hull, I'll put the pictures in the show notes. It actually says Gerald R. Fard. You got to look closely. The O looks like an A in the font that the Navy uses. You know.
I think it says fart. Gerald R. Fart.
Oh, they're getting to that. Relatedly, unfortunately, it is with a heavy heart that I say Jacob cannot attend today. He is on a secret mission to actually clog up every single toilet on that aircraft carrier. You can look it up in the news right now. Gerald R. Ford clogged toilets.
Our boy, he poops.
He's going to have a long conversation with his doctor, but, you know, all a good cause. But we do have 3 people here today. We got Rae from ProlesPod, y'all. How you doing, Rae?
Hi. Hello.
Everyone's favorite prole. It's Rae.
Not if you ask Reddit, I'm not.
We rarely ask Reddit anything.
Yeah, and I have no desire to do that, so thank you.
Hi, I'm Rae. I am the DEI Proles Hire, the podcast ProlesPod, your bi-weekly dose of history, politics, and culture without the liberalism.
They say that that's the highest form of DEI when you hire yourself.
That's right. I like that.
I'm a nepotism DEI hire.
Well, Rae, we got a crazy one today. I believe it was you that suggested this book initially.
It was, which is insane because I'm pouring sweat right now. Like the level of anxiety and neuroses that I had leading up to and into this moment. And I just kept telling myself, like, you asked for this. I text you. And I was like, hey, have you done an episode on this book yet? Because I want to do it. And why? That's the same thing I did with Proles. And now every 2 weeks, I'm sweating my ass off in anxious fits, being like, I volunteered as tribute. Like, what? Why do I keep doing this?
Powered by anxiety, though. It works for you. It looks good on you. It works.
What is it that Aisha says? Like, the 2 motive forces of creativity are horniness and spite, and I think also anxiety. We can add a third one on there.
I like that.
But yeah, this book is Who Paid the Pipers of Western Marxism by Gabriel Rockhill. And I can't think of a better one to, when it comes to talking about the narrative, right, and how it's spun up and how it's propagated, like, I can't think of a better book to talk about. Because, folks, God, this is a crazy-making book, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
What, how did it first cross your attention, Rae?
I'm Gabriel Rockhill's #1 fan. If he has one fan, it's me. If he has no fans, I'm dead. I come from a history podcast where of the 4 of us, I am objectively like the worst at history. I really struggle to understand it. I'm very, very interested in theory and theory production. And so when this book was coming out, like I had it on pre-order. I read it like the day that it came out. And it answers like a very important question that I feel like we ask, and then also we get asked all the time. And it also answers why we get asked it all the time. And that question is sort of like, why are tankies, reclamation of the term, why are tankies always reaching back 100 years for theory? And it's like, yes, because we have to go back that far before the sort of like elite liberal capture of knowledge production and theoretical contributions, right? And so I like ate this up and then just reread it for this episode.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've read it twice as much as Jen, you or I have now, because we just wrapped it up not long ago. But
I know Jen did not want to read it at first, but you came around, right, Jen?
I just saw how big it was.
She texted me like she's like, this book is really big.
I ordered it and they're like, we're recording in 3 weeks. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I like to read. And it showed up and it is a 400-page book. And I texted Rae. I was like, why do you hate me?
Huge chunks of that are citations and endnotes. It's like 340 tops.
Yes. And when it just
it's
showed
like
up
the
in the
Pomeranian of books. It looks big and fluffy, but once it's wet, there's a lot of shrinkage.
It's the size of a small child. But yeah, no, I actually did it mathematically. I said I had 21 days to read it, and I figured out how many pages I needed to read a day.
Sure, she texted me. She was like, I just have to read 30 pages a day. And I'm already ahead of schedule.
And I was ahead because it's so fucking good. And like positing this question, right? Who paid the pipers of Western Marxism? I feel like going into this, I was like, oh, the CIA, right? And that is the answer,
spoiler
I think, to the question. Sorry, spoiler. That is the answer to the question. But like you mentioned, like the end last like 50 pages are all like detailed citations and like pictures of documents, like legit. It's not just tankies blame everything on the CIA. It's like, no, we were right.
We got receipts, motherfucker.
Yeah, so many receipts.
Yeah, Gabriel Rockhill, of course, professor of philosophy, global interdisciplinary studies at Villanova University. He's had work in Counterpunch, in Black Agenda Report, Liberation, the New York Times. We don't hold that against him. He's also got a philosophy PhD from Emory, Atlanta. Shout out. And yeah, his educational background in particular, particularly the realization that it was totally unequal to the task of explaining geopolitics. He discusses this extensively in the book's preface. So he's got a preface essentially explaining how he's put together his thesis, how the United States has developed a countercurrent to dialectical and historical materialism, which is the intellectual underpinning of socialism. That and how he himself came to it, having studied under Derrida and realizing, wait a minute, I'm going in circles here.
And not even just that, right? Even before that, he really has a sort of like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory time of it, because he comes from like a very humble sort of like working class beginnings, right? I don't know if he had like 4 grandparents in the bed. He's neither confirmed nor denied that. Right, like the grandparent polycule of it all. But he certainly has this like moment, right, where he gets into these like higher educational institutions. He is even more motivated because he feels that sort of like chip on his shoulder or that anxiety that he's like, I'm from, buttfuck nowhere or whatever. My words, not his. And he sort of climbs his way to the top as he starts thinking like, wait a second, I think that there's like something wrong here. He struggles with, again, this like insecurity because by this point, right, he's like studying in the French language and he's studying in not his native language, right? And so he's French by choice. We also don't hold that against him, naturalized as a French citizen. But in this process, right, of building up that kind of dialectical thinking within himself, right? Because the people that he's working under are not going to validate those thoughts for him, if that makes sense. And so he really becomes like, I personally feel like Rockhill is like he's like an intellectual China, right? He's just like so good and so big in terms of his big brain And he really beats them at their own game. And it's because the academy forces people, which we'll talk about because it's like kind of part of the book, because the academy forces people to sort of like hyper specialize, right? When somebody like Rockhill comes along and learns multiple disciplines across multiple languages, there are just so few people up to the challenge of taking him to task, which, by the way, he's very open to having done. That's why he cited everything within an inch of its life, right? Like he has said repeatedly that he's like, if you want to follow all those citations, like I invite you to do that. If you want to bring back to me and show me where my thinking is wrong, I have laid it out because I am inviting that discourse. But the reality is the people who are most likely to defend the position he's arguing against are also the people least likely to be able to take him to task because their intellectual understanding of the world has been shaped by these very self-same forces. And they're, again, the people least likely to want to let all of that go.
Yeah, you just get a lot of nuh-uh in response to, like the interaction I had today on Twitter from someone that was just like, called it a hit job, and I was like, well, it's cited. Like, I don't, like, if you want to take issue with the things in here, like, it's all here. Like, sometimes half of a page is citations. So, like, if you want to take issue with anything, you are more than welcome to, like, look it up yourself.
I think it was Parenti who had the quote about how, like, for some reason, right, it becomes beyond the pale, this idea that a ruling class, like a group of people with certain interests, would act in those interests, right? Like, for some reason, that's beyond the pale to even suggest. Those interests being, of course, according to the text of this book, the construction of a intellectual countercurrent that's not just anti-communist, but like faux Marxist, right?
Yeah.
It's
well, that even more to the point, because earlier you correctly introduced it as dialectical and historical materialism, and even the process of the liberalizing and intellectual propertyizing of dialectical and historical materialism as Marxism, right? Which sort of reduces it to like, oh, this thing that this other European guy did. It sort of constructs this philosophical straw man that the academy then uses to fight against the thing that it made up.
Yeah, which thing, of course, is in service of the state of the world after the Second World War, after the Great War against global fascism, which, of course, the bulk of the heavy lifting was done by socialist forces, the USSR, China, and specifically like the what would go on to become the Red Army there. In the wake of that, in the wake of global popularity and success of socialism, what the fundamental challenge facing the United States is, okay, how do we blunt this force? How do we turn people away from capitalism? If not pro-capitalism, how do we turn people to a version of socialism that accommodates capitalism, that accommodates specifically U.S. empire?
And honestly, like, reading about that is, I mean, I don't ever feel like we should give props to the CIA, but like the way they did it is actually brilliant. Like,
Sure.
the way they essentially co-opted these ideas of Marxism and, yeah, like you said, blunted them, right? Like, just kind of shaved the revolutionary edges off, and we're like, oh yeah, we appreciate Marx as a philosopher. Maybe not all this Lenin stuff, and especially when it gets into talking about the global South and the imperialism aspect, the anti-imperialist aspect of Marxism, which I would argue is probably one of the most important aspects of it. I mean, obviously it is to people in the global South, to people that are imperialized. That is why imperialized people turn to Marxism, Leninism, to dialectical and historical materialism as a science of liberation. And the U.S. government did such a good job of like just numbing that part of it and making it acceptable to capitalism, to the bourgeois forces, to where, we ended up with this, where we think of people like AOC as like revolutionary in the United States, right? Because she is as far left as the US is willing to even think about. And so when you put that stop right there, we don't even have the imagination to think bigger than that. And they did a really good job of that.
Or we have the imagination, but the imagination has already been preempted and co-opted that we can only imagine the worst.
Yeah.
This is as good a time as any, I think. Ray, I was telling you not long ago, this book provides the only intellectually rigorous definition of the term cultural Marxism that I've ever seen, right? Like, because every other place that I've heard that term, it's some jackass conservative on social media that's you can swap in any slur you please for cultural Marxism, and you have a good idea of what they're getting at. But what Rockhill's arriving at here when he talks about cultural Marxism, right? He's talking about Western Marxism specifically, right? He's talking about a Marxism that is perhaps critical of capitalism in certain aspects, maybe even social democratic, but ultimately divorced from material analysis.
In the same way, and alongside with that, we then allow ourselves to obfuscate, and we get into it a lot in the book, right, as we go through it, but like we get to obfuscate what fascism is. We get to like reject the notion that fascism, like I'm pretty sure in Mussolini's own words, right, was the merging of corporations with the state, and to continue to perpetuate the upward transfer of wealth, which is like vitally important to understanding what fascism is. And so it sort of like strips that into vibes, and then it strips capitalism into vibes, and then it strips communism into vibes, which are the same vibes as fascism, but worse.
Yeah.
Because breadlines, question mark?
And it's where you get that idea of like horseshoe theory, right? Authoritarianism, bad, scary.
Because without the analysis, without the socioeconomic analysis of the two-stage revolution, which is what Marxism-Leninism is advocating for, you don't understand that, for example, in a capitalist state, censorship is depriving people of their human rights. But in a worker state, censorship can be a necessary part of statecraft so that they can be liberated from potential infiltration, right? And so to compare the state censorship under capitalism to the early Soviet Union is absolutely preposterous, but you get to do it, and you get to do it very, very, very neatly, so long as dialectical historical materialism gets reduced to Marxism, which just becomes a sort of floating philosophy in the ether that is detached from politics, history, or economics, which, by the way, so-called Marxism is a synthesis of all of those things. That's what made it as revolutionary as it is.
Right. Which is not to say that it's which is not to say that Marxism can be reduced to like the guy it's named after, that it's reducible to one guy. In fact, that's what that is the trend that Rockhill's pointing out here, is that it's in separating it from its scientific origins. What you get is a series of increasingly edgy philosopher kings that are putting out that are basically keeping up with the content cycle, right? That are putting out hotter and hotter takes sooner and sooner, responding to bourgeois trends and bourgeois culture, and essentially just turning it into, it's the IPification of a science.
Yeah. Can I read your definition you have right here of materialism?
Please.
Ideas are not separate from reality, hovering above it in a pristine realm of conceptual purity. They are developed within particular concrete circumstances, and they result from specific theoretical practices, which themselves are an outgrowth of society's overall organization of intellectual production, as well as production more generally. In class societies, ideas are therefore situated inevitably in class struggle. So dialectical and historical materialism is the intellectual foundation of socialism. Therefore, the project of the U.S. ruling class is to cultivate a counter current, which they do by laundering propaganda through journalism, academia, and entertainment.
This was such a maddening read, because like this book sits at the keystone. Like there's a lot of citations that you start to recognize when you read deeply enough in something, right? And this sits at the keystone not only of it's actually a good primer, I think, for somebody who's getting into like geopolitics and how it intersects with philosophy.
I think it's a good primer for anyone who has a master's degree.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a
in
master's degree,
anything.
but I try my best.
I don't even have a first real degree, so I get it. I'm just saying I would send it to any friend of mine who had a master's degree.
But like you'll recognize William Bloom in the citations, you'll recognize Parenti, you'll recognize that specific paper that is the nightmare of anti-communists everywhere: capitalism, socialism, and the physical quality of life. So it sits at the keystone of a lot of these things, and then he takes a step further. And when if you've read deeply enough in history, I couldn't help but think of Eric Lichtblau's The Nazis Next Door, right? Because there's a lot of this book, there's a lot of the ideological production that the United States engaged in that you can tie directly to the transplanting of a whole bunch of Wehrmacht men from collapsing Nazi Germany to the United States and elsewhere, right? There's a bunch of previous intellectuals, functionaries, administrators from this former fascist state that were reintegrated into this structure that the United States and its allies rebuilt, right? And how convenient it must be to have a strain of philosophy that suggests that your material conditions somehow don't have an impact on your intellectualism and your professional life, right? You can have these Nazis transplanted from one location to another totally cleanly.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us knew about, Operation Paperclip, right? But the numbers he really puts to it here and explaining like where some of these named people went is just really telling. We're like, oh yeah, some of them went into NATO, some of them went into like the space program and stuff. But then he's like, literally every like Ivy League college, and they went specifically into like the history and the politics department. These people were in charge of the literal ex-Nazis, were just brought over and put in charge of Berkeley or Yale or Harvard's history department. And then I think a lot of us know that a lot of them went to Argentina, but then like specifically were like placed in South and Central America by the U.S. government to go and destabilize these places and make sure that they are not having a revolution, a working class revolution.
And this sort of answers one of those questions, right? Like for among the Tanky Girly group chat, it can almost seem like a contradiction, right? That all of the most racist, fascist, colonial powers in the modern era, like the United States, England, Germany, France, the Netherlands, would be the countries that also have the largest humanities departments, right? That like, for example, the top Southeast Asian studies program in the world, like one of them is like in the Netherlands, right? They do not have, except for Singapore, as an outlier, they do not have a like fully functioning higher degrees in, for example, something like Southeast Asian studies. I know that because I lived in the region. And as Lenore and I have recently talked about, I'm an encyclopedia of going abroad for any reason, including study. So if you have any questions, listeners, please reach out to me. I will talk you through that. Anyway. Just personal interest of mine, apropos of nothing. But as you think about that, it seems really strange. Like, why would these people who are hell-bent on dehumanizing entire swaths of the population construct this, right? And as you start to read this book, it really answers the question, because in the wake of the Second World War and in the restructuring of the world order, the US, and then by extension, the other sort of Western European imperial powers want to participate in leading and controlling that narrative, right? And so like, as you were saying about like to ensure that throughout Latin America, which is the region in which I live, we don't have this kind of knowledge production, right? Like very recently, we recorded another episode on, it was on Ecuador, and we couldn't find an Ecuadorian historian in Ecuador who was also a communist. We had to find an American who had studied, and you see why, because all of the program. I mean, obviously he didn't learn communism in any of those universities, right? And hey, sorry for our Let Them listeners. I did actually find someone who was relatively reasonable. She just didn't feel comfortable speaking in English for an English language podcast. So I do want to say that there was an additional barrier in that. However, do you see what I'm saying? That often it's really hard to find people who are doing cultural production in their own countries of origin, unless those countries are in the imperial core. And it is because the imperial core has this long-standing history of needing to get ahead of not just control the narrative, but invent the narrative. And like, as we also see through this book, one of the points that Rockhill is making is not only do these institutions construct the knowledge, they also ensure that they are constructing an environment that will continue to perpetuate new people who will create new versions of the same knowledge. That is, again, feeding into the same illusion, right? We have all of these like constant books, and I'm not saying there's nothing interesting in any of them, but I read, 10 books a year that are, challenging, like, are we in a new mode of production? Is it no longer capitalism? Is it this other thing, based on like all of these different arguments? And I'm not saying that they have nothing to offer, but the bulk of this work is just a sort of distraction and recycling the sort of same things when it's like, well, I don't know, because my understanding of whether or not we're in capitalism is our relationship to the mode of production, and the existing mode of production, which as far as I understand, hasn't essentially changed.
Yeah, you do touch on something that Rockhill brings up very early on and reiterates several times throughout the book, that like, not all of these people, some of them, not all of these people collaborated with CIA knowingly, collaborated with former Nazis knowingly, to the degree that you can be a former quote-unquote Nazi. But there are a lot of public intellectuals in these fields that have done like legit work that's worth following. Even Marcuse, like later in life, was radicalized and had certain takes in support of certain student movements and anti-imperialist movements that were correct, sure. But the point that he's making that's larger is, look, they all exist in this environment that is created for a very specific, for the purpose of furthering a very specific political economy, and B, involves what he calls a financial, military intellectual complex, right? Or a financial state intellectual complex, right? There is a revolving door between the OSS, which would later become the CIA, right? Many of those personnel went on to become agents of intellectual production in the United States, for example, university presidents and professors, and they receive their funding for a lot of the research, as he reveals, from military and State Department sources. Of course, there's a note that I have in my notes. Where else would it be other than in my notes? There's a note that I have that I showed y'all that was, oh God, not another dude. Because that is a lot of this book, is Rockhill's digging up receipts, detailing the relationships and detailing who paid whom and who worked with whom. And it gets dizzying.
I'm Lenore. I have an English degree. I correctly use who and whom.
I had to do something with it.
I know when it's a subject and when it's an object, and I can tell the difference.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
That was not Rae speaking. That was actually me. That's
her speaking in her shadow voice.
Inner voice coming out.
Wait, I also have to say, I'm not entirely, so I don't know that I would use the language that Marcuse was radicalized. First of all, I think that he largely restricted his critiques to specific acts that the government was engaged in, which is similar to the people that are out protesting right now being like, this is not what America stands for, or like whatever. And also, when you're that far into your career and you've gotten the bag that many times, this like sort of mea culpa, it's like, hey, better late than never. But it's not as though he came out and was like, Stalin did nothing wrong. Right. He came out and he was like, don't like murder student groups.
Right. Like that's literally just what liberalism is. Yeah.
But also it's so indicative of the rightward shift even during like Marcuse's professional, not even his like actual lifetime on earth. I mean, just like his professional lifetime, like how far right things had gotten that like he probably didn't even move left.
Yeah.
This is, of course, like there is an epigraph in the latter half of the book where Marcuse, like literally on the eve of the Bay of Pigs invasion, he's like, "Oh yeah, I think the U.S. has the right to combat communism in its sphere." Fuck off.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like he Particularly in chapter 1 where he lays this out, right? What Rockhill's saying here is that, like, by insisting that philosophers' work is independent of their material circumstances, right? This is how social science shackles intellectual production to intellectual property and diverts it from even a cursory material analysis of what's happening here at home, right? There's a disconnect between the impact of, for example, the CIA, which is responsible for 6 million deaths over 40 years of the Cold War into the 80s, and the seriousness of US research into their activities, right? Right?
Mhm.
This is what
And
we start
beyond
talking, yeah.
and beyond just that, again, the system of the actual structure of the
Mhm.
departments of the university are replicating itself in the cultural and intellectual production. And what I mean by that is, like, why is economy not related to history? Why are they two
Mhm.
separate disciplines that are even in different buildings? Why is the humanities? Why is philosophy? Why is history? Then we have anthropology, which is just to say that colonized people deserved it and brown people don't get their own history and philosophy, so they have their own room.
Yeah.
Things like this, right? So everything is so atomized so
Mhm.
that we can't really do, I mean, you see a recent rise of the academy, the contradictions within the academy trying to correct themselves with this rise of, like, interdisciplinary studies. And it's
Mhm.
literally because things have become so niche that you cannot fill out an entire degree program within one's specific discipline because they've been so divided and subdivided that you, like, have to, right? It's like how we used to have cable and then we had, like, Netflix, but now we have to have, like, Netflix and HBO and Peacock and Amazon Prime, and, like, all of it still adds up. And now it also costs more than cable did.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
again,
It's like
it's
that
not
at the university level. So then when you put those ideas out, it's like, of course they have to stand alone because nobody should be speaking outside of their, like, lane, their discipline.
and
Mhm.
it's done fully on purpose to keep us from putting these things together, from understanding. I see this a lot online where people are like, they want to just care about their one little niche issue, right?
Mhm.
Whether that is women's rights or queer rights or free Palestine or whatever it is, right? And this refusal to see the way all of these things are fully interconnected and basically the same struggle because it is the same enemy. That's what they did
And you
with
can't arrive through liberal thought production. You can't
right.
arrive at that conclusion. You need dialectical and historical materialism. That is the lens, the aperture through which the tools that you use, right? It's not some dead white guy's ideas. It is the tools that you use to construct a clear and three-dimensional picture of the what is.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Mhm.
But this is how you get people that are like for feminism or whatever. And, like, oh, I just forgot that Palestine also had women.
Gloria Steinem is called out specifically in this book for being
Yes.
a knowing, open CIA collaborator, right?
She
Yeah, like,
loved it. She's
mhm,
like,
mhm.
I'm in all the group chats. These are all the homies.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, we'll have abortion, we'll have bodily autonomy, but like decolonial feminism, we don't need to talk about that. We don't need to talk
Right.
about that,
Right.
right? Right?
Yeah, this book does not pass the Bechdel test. There are two women mentioned in this book.
Oh my
One
god, and
is
neither does this episode. We're just all talking about boys.
damn it. One is Gloria Steinem, negatively, and then one is Angela Davis is mentioned in here positively. So
Yes.
we get the duality of woman here. The only
Mhm.
two women,
The two
Gloria
genders.
Steinem and the two
The
genders,
two genders, Gloria Steinem and Angela
and
Davis.
Angela Davis.
Uh,
I did think it was interesting that these were all literally all men as well. It was something I noted while I was reading this. I was like, girls are vindicated. We did not do this.
Because we didn't get to go to school.
Yeah, it's true. We didn't get to be Nazis. Sorry.
but yeah, it's and this is a tangent, but right, I mean, go back to our Talia Bot episode where we talk about transfeminism and specifically anti-colonial transfeminism, of the sort that she espouses, right? In the same way that you get a cultural Marxism from this divorce from material analysis, you also get a cultural feminism, which she mentions in her book.
Brown trans les.
Yeah, brown trans lens and also trans red femme.
Yeah.
A cultural feminism that emerged from the second wave that was divorced from a material analysis of gender relations and gave rise to things like, oh yeah, like women are just like naturally more empathetic, this, that, the other, like.
Yeah, and again, it is always been done on purpose. It is purposefully set up like this to keep us from understanding and uniting with people under our shared struggle. They keep us from thinking that our struggle is shared.
Exactly. And then
Drives
you,
me fucking crazy.
yeah, and then you get, in the same way, to tie back to cultural Marxism, right? Then it becomes, okay, so why are Marxists in the West doing this? Why are Marxists in the East doing that? Right? Um, all these people, it will be noted, like Adorno, Horkheimer, Marcuse. These were guys that worked closely with the Frankfurt School, right, which is basically a think tank that produced this strain of Western Marxism. And in their estimation, right, what is the East doing? The East is falling to like dominance, to authoritarianism. They do some seriously racist and Western chauvinist takes to explain away why there's actual anti-imperialist state building projects taking place over there and not over here.
And you still see it a lot. And again, I know that I am way too online, but like I see this, and he talked about some of these things too, how it's like this diminishing, or like, that's not the word I'm looking for. Just like the way that people talk down about actually existing socialism. Oh, well, China's actually doing state capitalism. Vietnam, they did these reforms in the mid 80s and they're not actually building. So Cuba's not actually, like you see this all the time. And it's just this way to denigrate.
And
that's the word
even
I was
mentioning the DPRK is basically a thought crime.
You're not even allowed to do that. Ask Madeline Pendleton how that goes for them all the fucking time. But
God,
like
Lenin, such a state capitalist doing the new economic policy. What the fuck?
And it's because people do not understand dialectical and historical materialism. They think that President Xi is just going to push the communism button, and then all of a sudden, everything's equal and from each according to ability.
It's also predicated on the individualist narrative that has been proposed since and throughout neoliberalism, which is like, we have the freedom of expression and we have the freedom to think, and then you're also told that the rest of the world doesn't have that. Even though, by the way, in Vietnam they learn dialectical and historical materialism in fucking secondary school when they're like early teenagers, so they know how to think critically about pretty much anything if they choose to apply those sort of skills, right? And so we have to believe that. And there's all of the latent racism and Orientalism of the belief that like these populations have different mental capacities than anyone else in the world, right? The same people that are like the aliens built the pyramids because they can't possibly believe that like brown people figured that out a long time ago. Do you see what I'm saying? And so it's just sort of like the belief that like there's something essential, right? This sort of like, we can also talk about how Western Marxism veers off into identity politics that become preemptively even more so absorbed by the sort of woke left TM. And as this all sort of happens, we get to like reduce the other populations in the world that like they are brainwashed. They can't think for themselves. And it is like through this projection, right? That we ourselves come to obfuscate our own understanding of ourselves, which is basically, by the way, for listeners, my favorite chapter of this book is chapter 3. And it sort of explains why, by the way, like Chomsky, for example, can rest in peace, can come out with...
I don't think he's dead yet.
He's dead to us.
He's close.
Dead to me.
Yeah, fair.
Where he can come out with these sort of basically this book, by the way, explains not why Chomsky was in the Epstein files, but why someone in the Epstein files becomes a hero for people on the self-proclaimed left, right? It basically explains this. But also how somebody like Chomsky can come out with those one-liners. Do you all remember when he's talking to the reporter? I don't even remember if this is real or if it's apocryphal, but I think it is real. I just can't remember where he shares this. But he's speaking to the reporter and saying that like, well, you have your job because you'll say the things that like the state wants you to say. And the reporter is like, I never get told what to say. And he's like, yes, that's why they hired you, because they don't have to waste their time telling you what to think because you already think that. So how somebody like Chomsky, who's not the example that is given in chapter 3, it's like Adorno, but essentially how Chomsky can have these kinds of critiques of the rest of the world, but doesn't know how to return that reflection and those same critical, he doesn't know how to do self-crit. He doesn't know how to turn that inward and to sort of do it on himself. And so we see this sort of like mass, I mean this in the pop culture sense of the word, not the diagnostic sense of the word, mass psychosis within the United States, that there's this constant projection of the way that the rest of the world thinks and moves and behaves and does statecraft and does decision making, but it is actually a reflection of what is happening specifically in the United States and within the imperial core.
Exactly. You have a whole cadre of people who can, I don't know if that's the right word or not, but who can critique the culture industry and make a name for themselves doing it without critiquing the theory industry, right? Without taking to task
which signs their checks.
Yeah.
Because why would you critique the thing that made you famous, or that at least made you niche famous within your field?
I like to call this the opinion column class, right? You're Francis Fukuyama, you're Thomas Friedman, you're Ezra Klein, right? You know, who at best would support, socialists, quote unquote, social democrats that are social chauvinists and stridently anti-communist. Conversely, of course, you have theorists here in the United States that are active and prolific, and these are people like Michael Parenti and George Jackson, and these people get marginalized or assassinated. Parenti, of course, we will remember, was never able to secure a tenured position because he was a principled anti-imperialist voice. Rest in peace. He died fairly recently.
Is this where you wrote Marxism clavicularism
in
the notes?
Oh yeah. So
I'm still mad at you and Jacob that I know who that is, because it is completely y'all's fault on the Discord that I learned. And now he fucking pops onto my timeline all the time, and it is completely y'all's fault.
Well, I think he would have crossed your path anyway. He's getting a huge boost from, hate rags like the New York Times and whatnot. But what I mean by Marxism clavicularism, by the way, is part of, as Rockhill points out, part of building the legitimacy of this sort of thing, of Western Marxism, of non-dialectical Marxism, is constructing this symbolic economy, right? It's got its own language, it's got its own phraseology. If you don't understand it, you're not trying hard enough, right? So it's reduced to who can be most prolific, most cutting edge. It's not about scientifically elucidating the objective world, right? It's about constructing individual philosophies that have value as far as they resonate with the bourgeois canon that people are already bought into. If you have a unique take, you're in, right? And this book really put into words what I was struggling to articulate in our other more philosophy heavy episodes, right? Like Myth of Sisyphus and whatnot, right? My problem with philosophy is that I always stumble across, okay, but why?
But where do I put this?
Yeah. Well, and indeed, your Adornos, your Horkheimers, right? In the a lot of this book is devoted to discussing the Frankfurt School and its role in promulgating this sort of thought, right? Your Adornos, your Horkheimers, right? Their involvement in mass politics is almost purely intellectual, right? They rejected, and there's a theoretical aspect to it, A, and there's a class aspect to it, B, right? They rejected the notion that critical theorists ought to ground their research in the proletariat. They call such thinking totalitarian. Of course they fucking do. And as far as class goes, right, it's very convenient for their bourgeois backgrounds, right? They're already comfortable doing this. Why would they shake that foundation?
Yeah, and I think it's later in the book, but where he talks about the point of this is to keep these things amongst the intellectual class, amongst the learned people, the people that are going to taking these classes at these Ivy League colleges, and the professors themselves, and gatekeeping it from the working class. They don't believe that the working class is even deserving of even their bullshit form of it. Because they're too stupid to understand it, and we wouldn't even want them to have that watered down version, because they would probably still run with
hammer and hoe. The Alabama Communist Party was teaching Marxism to illiterate farmers in Alabama. You don't have.
Every revolution has been done like that.
I think that there's truth. I think that there's truth in their claim. I actually do. I do think that the proletarians wouldn't get it, because our firsthand anecdotal experience disproves it. So it's not for the reasons that they say it. It's just that if you tried to tell me this was how the world worked, I would say, well, clearly it doesn't. And so there's another reason to construct this other reality that also makes it aspirational, right? And there's something, when I tell you the moment, so I've been talking about what I call, and apparently what Rockhill also calls intellectual imperialism for like 20 years. So obviously, listeners, if you hear it in my voice, I was born and raised in the United States. I left about 20 years ago and I lived in a bunch of places since then. But anyway, I no longer live in that country. And for many years, I was an international school teacher, right? And so we see, and Rockhill sort of talks about this, that the intellectual imperialism. So if you are one of these Chomskys, if you are one of these Steinums who gets sort of elevated as the intellectual powerhouses of the West, you de facto become, because as I said, it's the Western universities who lead the charge in developing these whole departments, these whole like modes of thought, right? So you become the top of the pyramid, right? The university is a sort of like global pyramid scheme, and you become the top of the pyramid. And then it's not just you, the people with, as you were saying, Jen Big Nasty, the class background that you have, it's also for the hopefuls within the third world who are aspiring to be upwardly mobile. And it's interesting because this from the top, this is trickle down. Hey, one thing worked. So this is the trickle down that you see when you go to international schools or bilingual schools that try to attract local kids. This is what facilitates that brain drain, right? This is what facilitates that idea that West is best, even starting as early as kindergarten, that it's somehow better or superior that my child goes to a French school or a British school or a US American curriculum school or whatever that is, to have some kind of like a leg up, some kind of opportunity, some kind of lottery ticket to buy your way in to these upper echelons, where they're all just saying like refrigerator magnets of philosophy words. And as long as you can continue to pretend that they're saying something real, as long as you're willing to say the emperor is wearing clothes, you can go as high as you want.
Yeah, this of course is all in the service of, of course, part and parcel of this intellectual production is putting people directly in these directly in pride of place, right? The CIA placed hundreds of operatives in publishing houses, in academic institutions, in news agencies, and Rockhill sums it up pretty well here. If sources from different perspectives, which might have significant disagreements, all concur on certain fundamentals, it sends the message that these agreements are based on fact, not ideological persuasion, when in reality the exact opposite is the case, right? So if you have like the Wall Street Journal saying something that also like a leftist zine is saying, right? And the CIA did get into printing zines, right? All the way from the top to the bottom of intellectual production in terms of prominence and in terms of legitimacy, right? Like they created this false consensus whereby this this imperial Marxism, as he calls it, was pushed. The Marshall Plan, incidentally, was a big driver of this kind of thing. He details how governments, recipients of aid through the Marshall Plan in the wake of the Second World War, right? They would deposit the value of the aid that they received in their own banks, and then 5% of it was siphoned for intellectual production. So, like, it was a source not directly American funding this thing. So there's that extra layer of obfuscation. It's nuts, and you sound insane if you're summarizing this to people, but it's true.
The conspiracy theorists were correct.
Conspiracy phobia on the left. Go look it up.
No, I mean, the expression conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorists were made by the CIA.
Yes, because they have that monopoly in intellectual production that allows them to say, no, like, you're the conspirators. Our misinformation is legit, is objective, God, I mean, like I could go on. I have what do I got here in my notes? Right. Oh my God, you literally have CIA sock puppets reviewing books in certain outlets. The CIA published Dr. Zhivago in Russian. Before the end of 1967, the CIA produced, subsidized, sponsored over 1,000 books. In some cases, they basically ghost wrote them. Couldn't help but think of, the police do the same thing in this country, where they have some, sometimes they'll have intellectuals put their names to an article calling for greater police funding, when in reality it's the police themselves, like, writing this shit. Like, it's the same. It's all the way down. This thing, this dynamic is reproduced.
Yeah, it's literally how we do foreign news with our Radio Free Asia, Radio Free Cuba. Like, all of that is just straight up lies and propaganda all the way through.
Just the other day, Jen, like we were talking about the the Politico, right, was talking about that. Could a Castro, like, could a distant relative of Fidel Castro, who's like down with us, be our like Juan Guaido on that island of Cuba?
God.
Which claim was traced to some dude shit posting on Facebook.
Right. Yeah, they'll pull it from anywhere. Like they really are reading everything you tweet. And running with the most absurd Alex Jones type shit. They love it. I mean, that's why he got so big. He was propped up by all that stuff as well, because it's absurd, you know.
It's absurd, and you know it's poisoning the well, right?
Yeah.
Like if you start putting this stuff
Sure.
together, like you can't.
Sure.
It's unavoidable that you're going to sound like the absolute, you know, what's the word that I'm looking
the
for?
tinfoil hat guy screaming on the corner. Yeah.
Or that a lot of if you wanted to have a conversation about like, I don't think we should be spending money on Israel, there are rooms in which you sound MAGA. To just like have a not even a pro-Palestinian or anti-imperial, just like an in one instance like a non-interventionalist. Or if you're saying, I don't think that we should restrict the internet, I don't think that we should like keep children off the internet but not change anything about the platforms. I mean, you sound like anti-vax, far right, tinfoil wellness grifter, homesteader, or something like that, right? So they make it so that the positions that would be, I mean, I'm not saying moderate in terms of our economy. I'm just saying like literally just sort of like, oh, should be, well, I can't, again, you can't say common sense anymore because it's not common.
Right.
One of the aims of this entire project for the last at least 60 years has been explicitly, I mean, the CIA papers are quoted in the book and cited, as you said, Jen Bignasty, that like the point is that the average US American actually doesn't know what's real. It's not actually about constructing an alternative. It's making you unable to trust what you're looking at right in front of your own fucking face. When you see a headline, you're like, I don't even know if that's real and I'm not going to take the time to look it up. That is also part of the plan. The people who are like the sad, hopeless liberals, like you are the end conclusion of this because you don't believe that organizing is possible. You don't believe that revolution is worth your time. You don't believe in armed struggle because that sounds too right wing for you. So all you can do is just be hopeless and despair and look to the fucking CIA-backed Dalai Lama.
Despair alone can save us. I think it was Adorno like that said that very thing, you know.
Pessimism of the intellect, pessimism of the will.
And it's a big part of the reason I think that they are
Nova said that on Trash Future First. Nova said that on Trash Future First. November, I love you. Please come on my
credit
show.
where it's due. It's part of the reason they're pushing this AI because it makes you detach from reality. Because I've fallen for AI videos already. You know, you're looking at it on your small little screen. You see a thing happen. And you're like, whoa, that's crazy.
Well, Jen, unfortunately, I hate to break it to you, but Will Smith did not turn into a plate of spaghetti that he then ate.
Damn it!
Are you serious?
I'm such a boomer. I really thought he was
send it to you
spaghetti.
afterwards. It's nuts.
Okay, not that stuff, but some of them, you know, there's like police videos that are very deceptively, you know, because we see police violence videos all the time, right? And we're almost numb to it at this point. And so when you see one and it's AI, you're just like, yep, there's another one, you know, and we're just bombarded with this stuff.
Or even just a headline beyond just the video media. Maybe you see a headline that is worded in a certain way. And even for us, like right on the left, I mean, some of the I don't think we should be, they're all the right. The left starts with us. I'm sorry. But anyway, like I you know, MAGA in comparison to like a more liberal or like far right wing composed to near right wing, that I don't think that we should be generous with them. But for example, there could be like a very ungenerous headline and I might look at it and not read the full article. I'd be like, yep, sounds like something he'd say, or I bet they'd do that. And it's like not really accurate, you know, and it constructs a sort of like degree of reality.
Right.
Well, and a degree of reality that resists analysis, you know. Like,
and if enough of your friends have the same or similar algorithms,
right,
you're just hearing it so many times or seeing it so many times, and all of your friends are seeing it too, that even if you don't understand it, you just assume, well, there must be something I don't know about this because
Maybe J.D. Vance did sing We Are Charlie Kirk. Maybe he does have a Josh Groban kind of vocal range. Who can say, right? Like, the CIA literally called this sort of thing Operation Chaos, right? In the 60s and 70s when they were surveilling and targeting anti-war and like socialist activist and news network. Right? It's meant to be discombobulating in nature, right? Yeah, it sucks.
It's conclusion of this book. Well, the book doesn't suck. Everything else does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the book is so good.
The book is so good.
It is good. It is good. No, and it's exhausting. It's simultaneously exhausting and yet like very, very readable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I was 15
yeah.
years old,
yeah,
my drama club teacher
Mhm.
said, "Oh, but your mom's not your mom, right?" And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "You're adopted." And I was like, "What?" And I sat with this for a minute and I was like, holy shit, I am. And so I asked my dad at the Pizza Hut. I was like, Dad, am I adopted? And my dad was like, what? And then was like, yes. And that day was so complicated because my mom, the woman who raised me, was crying. My biological mom called me. She was insane. And she was like, what should I do? What should I tell my daughter? And I was like, girl, I'm literally 15. My aunt was crying, like everything was going crazy and it was so exhausting. But at the same time, so many previous moments where I was like, this is weird, clicked for me. And listeners, that is my experience reading this book. So like, yes, to your point, Lenore, it's very exhausting, but it's also like you have so many moments where you're like, holy shit, for the first time, that makes sense.
No, like T, absolutely. Like it's and you see, as I said, like with the police analogy, right? So many commonalities from a global scale down to a national scale, right? It all works the same way. A, in terms of how of how this obfuscation works, and B, in terms of where this all comes from, right? I couldn't help but think like when we were talking about the Nazi connections to the Frankfurt School earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
They teamed up with the Mannesmann Corporation, which is a Nazi corporation, for a research contract. They were funded in part by IG Farben during the war, which also made the Zyklon B gas that they used in the death camps, right? It's in a similar way as the Nazi machine was reincorporated into global capitalism, right, and global imperialism. Go back to American history, right, and the total kneecapping of Reconstruction, right? How the South was not, in fact, kept under military occupation for decades, and the Confederate class was not all rounded up and dispossessed and executed if necessary, mostly necessary. But instead, they were allowed to be the foot soldiers and the intellectual and the industrial and financial backers of this reincorporation, this standing up again of capital. It happens again and again and again throughout history. And when will it stop?
When we rise up as a working class and overthrow it all?
Yeah, that's a question that only we can answer. You're absolutely right.
If you'd let me read a bit here, this starts on page 324, where we're talking specifically about Marcuse. Is that how you say his name? Marcuse? Marcuse. Yeah, fuck him. It doesn't matter. I'm going to mispronounce his name. So he is essentially like the main character in this story in a lot of ways, right? If you hadn't put a name to the person who paid the pipers of Western Marxism, it is this man in a lot of ways, and just this outsized influence he had over this idea of the compatible left, the Western Marxism, the chauvinist Marxism, whatever you want to call it. It has a lot of different names. But there are, I think these are five points that essentially boils down like his theory, is at least what I wrote in my notes. It was like this idea to discredit Marxism, Leninism, and to create this compatible left. So there are 5 bullet points that I just wanted to mention while we're here. Number 1, he asserts that today it is evident to what degree the Marxist-Leninist model for revolution has become historically obsolete because the armed seizure of power is, quote, beyond the realm of possibility. And again, this is something we see a lot. I see it all the time online where people are like, well, we can't do that. That's not possible here. Blah, 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 blah. You see it
and
constantly.
also, it involves doing exactly what we've been saying since the top of the episode, which is first reducing Marxism-Leninism to something that is prescriptive and dogmatic.
Right.
Nowhere in Marxism-Leninism does it say that it has to be armed struggle. It just doesn't preclude it because of the already existing violence of the state. It would be dogmatic to try to redo the Soviet Union on other countries.
Right,
but
of course. Right.
Lenin himself would not have said that that was the idea.
Right,
of course, the early Bolsheviks, the early Soviet Union did try to use their country as the model because it was the only experiment like of its kind that had ever existed. But it was not literally a recipe, a formula.
Right. That's why we need materialism, right? So number two, second, the class struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, Marcuse maintains, has been replaced by a new populism. Marcuse, oh God. I can't. It's been replaced by a new populism, which is not founded on class opposition and does not seek state power, but it is rather a rebelliousness that cuts across the classes. So this idea,
and we see that again when people who weaponize something like techno-feudalism. I read that book, by the way. I thought it was really interesting. I thought there were really interesting parts. But what it does when it is absorbed into the woke left TM, the compatible left, what this does is it says that like, okay, so everything we've done up until this point doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work anymore. We just get to start again, because when you don't see dialectical and historical materialism as something that is using the scientific process, it's sort of like we all get to have the same conversations again. Like, does 2 + 2 = 4? I don't know. From over here, it doesn't. And I guess if it doesn't, that means we just have to start over.
Well, I don't know. For very high values of 2, maybe.
Fair enough.
Number three, he celebrates this displacement of objective in favor of the subjective, right? Mm-hmm. And it talks about how subjectivism is a hallmark of Marcuse's work in general. And
Strawberry Fields, nothing is real. Postmodernism will save us.
Talks about personal feelings united with individual consciousness are the drivers of rebellion, not class struggle.
It's just guys being dudes, you know?
Just dudes rock, you know? That's all we need. Fourth, the
class
relationship
struggle,
between...
just girly things.
That's what we're doing here. Just girly things. Talking about
girls revolution. Be like, I need this, and it's armed proletarian revolution.
Yes. Number 4, the relationship between base and superstructure is redefined. Instead of economic forces and class struggle being the motors of social change, Marcuse sees intellectuals as playing a leading role. This is what we were talking about earlier, right?
Maybe the base and superstructure is just the friends we made along the way.
Just the friends we made along the way. Where he talks about these ideas being beyond the reach of the working class, right?
Marcuse, you cad!
You bitch.
There are 2 wolves inside of you, and both of them have to work at Walmart, so they can't read.
Could it be perhaps that podcasters are the vanguard? Vote down and divide.
That is true. Podcasters.
The revolution will not be televised. In fact, it will be podcasted.
It will be podcasted, yes.
You can join our revolution over at patreon.com/ProlesPod, where for just...
Yeah, above a certain tier, you get more revolutionary.
Yes. Since subjective thoughts and feelings are the real drivers of history, and the intelligentsia has time to indulge in them, intellectuals constitute the veritable vanguard of social change, which is a batshit. A batshit.
I can't help but think of
what's so funny is like nobody reads their shit except for each other, and they're all just like circle jerking each other's pamphlets, and they're like, we're the vanguard.
Yeah, no, like exactly. No, like I can't help but think. I mean, we're reading we're reading Christina Hoff Sommer's like Who Stole Feminism in a few weeks. We're gonna tear that shit apart. And like as I'm reading it, I can't help but think that like, okay, this is not for like mass production, right? Regular people aren't reading these books. It's the Ben Shapiro's and everybody else in the conservative sphere. Like they buy these books just to have them on the back wall on their fucking video calls or whatever when they go on each other's podcasts. You know, like it's.
But I mean, Marcuse is predating all of this. Like he's literally talking about people circle jerking each other's papers inside the academy.
Right.
And they're like, guys, I really think we're the vanguard. I really think we're leading the change.
Okay, let me read the last one. 5th, he openly advocates for an anti-state politics that rejects centralization. He has asserted in this lecture in 1971 that a strong element of anarchism should be incorporated into Marxism. He suggests that the Revolutionary Mass Party is probably outdated. So
See,
we're just all going to do our own thing.
Yeah, 8 or 10 years ago, like China was actually like not like when China like neutralized all the like CIA dudes that were in their country, like that was actually a betrayal of socialism. You guys, they shouldn't have used the state and intel apparatus at their disposal.
No, that is
we're just going to BDS our way to revolution. I'm sorry. That was a really, really great summary of the Marcuse, Jen Big Nasty. It was, and that was, I can't imagine. Again, Lenore and I were texting about this earlier because listeners who don't know, I do in fact have a degree, but I went to university for acting, and like I have a big like chip on my shoulder. I always feel like I'm, intellectually inferior. There's like so many things that I don't know. Like I really resonate with like Rockhill's earlier story, except for I didn't continue my education. And then you just like think about this dude who's like the top of the top coming in and being like, bro, like, I got this new pamphlet I want y'all to check out. I think it's the future. And everybody's just like...
It's called One Dimensional Man, which actually Flat Stanley is a remake of. Go look it up.
Flat Stanley will lead the revolution.
and it's in this that this was so funny to me. Like in my notes, I just have ha 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 ha. Right? He posits in this piece that like
it's not just in your notes, Lenore. It's actually in the document for the episode. It's just one bullet point. No, the listeners are not aware.
Oh,
There's one bullet point that just says ha 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 ha.
Yeah, because I'm talking about like where Marcuse posits in whatever pronounce his fucking name, where he posits in One Dimensional Man, right? That the bourgeoisie and the proletariat are no longer antagonists because they share a mutual interest in the preservation and the improvement of the intellectual status quo. Jen, you touched on this earlier, right? It's abundance shit, right? It's Ezra Klein saying, hey, we need to cut the red tape and just let the billionaires, the John Galts, the fucking like just whoever of the world that's on top and is smart enough and rich enough to command the levers of power. We need to just let them figure shit out. And
they're job creators.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sorry, like, look no further than the fucking like people who claim that Nvidia is gonna take the global GDP from $100 trillion to $500 trillion, right? Like, yeah, $400 trillion is sports betting, right? That's an interest in the preservation and improvement of the institutional status quo. Fuck off. You couldn't convince my cat of that, and you can convince my cat of pretty damn near anything. Except
what if I gave her a treat? Then I could probably convince her. And that's honestly, that was a joke, but that is literally what Americans run on, is our little treats, right? As long as we get our little treats, we'll fall for any of this bullshit. We literally do not care.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, things have to get worse.
It's end of history before Fukuyama put into those specific words, right? Yeah. Right. And yet he doesn't discuss like he has a theory sort of revolution, which he calls the Great Refusal, right? Where he, they do the whole thing, the intellectual sort of do-si-do, where like they repurpose anti-Nazi animus into a like generalized like anti-totalitarian animus.
Which again is refuting the notion of the two-stage revolution, wherein certain things are appropriate if you have a worker state.
Yeah.
that are not appropriate in your present moment reality. But to both of your previous points, the Western imaginary, the degenerate Westoid mind, cannot possibly fathom a world wherein, for example, the state might help you. And so anything that the state does must inherently be totalitarian and authoritarian, which are definitely words that absolutely mean something.
Totally full of content and intellectual rigor.
But if your brain is already rotted with 782 pages of Marcussi, you might think that those words mean something.
Hey, have you considered though no kings?
No.
Only kings.
Only kings. Check out my Only Kings, by the way, plug.
Yeah, like he has this like theory of totalitarianism, like the great refusal, right, where people will just collectively say enough is enough, right, and then everything will be cool. And he doesn't interrogate, right, like how the degree to which such quote unquote totalitarianism is a product of the financial state intellectual complex he's a part of. Right, which funds
and or why you hear so many people being like, "Oh, we could just do the Scandinavian model," without asking, first of all, how did those countries get there, and second, ignoring the fact that they're like Norway is a petrol state. First of all, aside from the fact that, like, yes, obviously, and they're sending money to Israel, and they are also extractivist, imperial, plundering nations that have always benefited from this upward transfer of wealth, but also like literally a petrol state. So,
well, and like it, and all
are we
this
gonna scale that?
like it doesn't even save Marcuse from being investigated by the U.S. state and from being sent death threats by the KKK, right?
Right.
Because or he was literally put on the administrative index of people considered a threat to national security.
But that's also a part of it. That is a part of the theater, right? Is to make it look like there's a real villain and that's the one. So again, mentioning these other alternatives are literally like they're thought crimes.
Right, right. You gain.
Sorry, really should not be leaning on Orwell at a time like this. Speaking of pawns for the CIA,
right?
He does incidentally mention Orwell, right? Like, there's a predecessor organization to the Institute for Social Research, right? The Frankfurt School, right? There's a predecessor organization not to the Frankfurt School, the predecessor organization to the to a predecessor of the CIA, right? In Britain. To which Orwell reported, right? Rockhill does bring that up.
Fuck Orwell.
And asks one of their employees hand in marriage. But he did be doing that.
Oh, God. Yeah. It should be mentioned. We may have mentioned it. The whole last chapter is about Marcuse and his position within this imperial production, this imperial intellectual production apparatus, right? And it should also be mentioned, this is the first volume of 3 books that
I can't wait.
Yeah. So yeah, we will doubtless have you back on, Rae, to delve into those as well, if and when they come out. They're gonna fucking come out. Like,
I assume he's already like working.
They're
on
essentially written. They're essentially written. Remember, he speaks about this
in the beginning. He talks about he basically had them all done, right, and was shopping it around or whatever. Had a hard time getting it published. Yeah,
and it was just so long.
He wrote a whole book in French that was pulled from publication, like literally right before it was to appear in shops.
Yeah, the opening of this book is so good. I read the whole opening all in one go because it was just what is it? It's called Chase Head or something like it. Yeah, I mean, like,
this book goes so hard.
It goes so hard. It's such a good way to grab you. Yeah, this book is impressive. I didn't know anything about Gabriel Rockhill before this. And so I am definitely now a fan. I'm very impressed by him.
Yeah. No, like, shout out to whoever can do a deep dive like this and to synthesize so many incredibly mundane letters and documents, right? Detailing all these relationships, right? I mean, that part of why the ruling class is winning is because, or not is winning, but like has historically reached the position where they're at, is they're relying not to do this sort of thing, you know?
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Like
I mean, I would say this is like Parenti level analysis. Like the way this book is written, it's like reading a Parenti book.
yes. Yeah,
It's the highest compliment I could probably give him.
yeah, Rip to God, he lived a long time. So what have we learned, y'all, against the intellectual, military, financial complex, which we didn't really get into the financial aspect of it, but I will say, like, there are a lot of the same CIA men, a lot of the same U.S. intelligence apparatus ghouls also served in leadership positions at like the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and it's through these foundations that a lot of grants for a lot of imperial Marxist compatible left papers and research projects. It's through them that this funding was secured, right?
So and they still control everything.
Yes,
like
they still.
Yeah,
they do, absolutely, and that's how this whole thing was built. That's pretty much as succinct an explanation as I can get into, right? So
this is essentially an Epstein Files level. Like it's the same class of people, 100%, right? Doing the same type of shit, laundering the same, whether it's war crimes or human trafficking. And I do think there was a mention of some sort of human trafficking in here. I didn't write it down. But these are things that have been happening with this class of people. I would argue since, the establishment of the U.S., but like specifically since the end of World War II and the start of the Cold War, for the purpose of stopping communism, right? It used to be maybe for the purpose of stopping emancipation or for the purpose of stopping women from gaining rights. But it's always been this same class of people utilizing the same techniques, and like it looks different as technology changes, but it is really the same type of propaganda, the same type of insidiousness in like the people who write our textbooks. That is Ghislaine Maxwell's father. It is so deeply ingrained, and I think that's why I get so upset. No, sorry, I get so upset when people talk about like saving the United States or like bringing back American democracy, as if in the last year since Trump was in charge something changed. When we know that this is like literally what the country was built on, and we have 400 fucking pages of proof right here. And it's like, how do I make? I think that is my big takeaway here, is like, how do I slap this into people's brains?
What we mentioned about like the financial aspect of the financial military intellectual complex, right? Like you have incredible wealth and capital undergirding the propagation of these intellectual strains, right? And again, like it's you cannot hold that in your head and also have like an anti-state, like anarchist sort of conception of these things, right? You, in order to protect and preserve democracy to the degree that it ever exists in the United States, you have to deprive the ruling class of their ability to marshal these forces. You have to effect a massive, major, fundamental shift in production relations, right? You have to, And in order to do that, you have to have an organized, disciplined party, and later on like a state apparatus capable of doing this shuffle. And by the way, it's a shuffle that'll take centuries, just as it took centuries for capitalism to emerge out of the ruins of feudalism, right? And how the hell can you do that if you insist at every turn that no, actually, like we can push the communism button right now?
Or as Parenti said, what about the fascists? Do they get to have their newspapers?
No!
Do they get to have civil rights? Yeah. You need that red fash authoritarianism to crush that shit.
This is like Vijay Prashad said on the show a few weeks back, right? Like you're allowed to be a capitalist in China, sure. You're not allowed to act as a class. You're not allowed to have like your own newspapers. You're not allowed
to buy elections.
Yes, yeah, and that's brilliantly put. Like, yeah, you can have a business. Like
you can amass wealth. You just can't do the same things with it that you can. In a bourgeois quote unquote democracy.
Yeah. Like,
and Jen, to your point, I've told this story on our show, but it might have been on a bonus episode. My mother-in-law loves the DPRK. God bless the people's husband. His whole family are socialists, but specifically, his mother loves the DPRK. And we were like, oh, we should send her the episode that we've done on the DPRK. Maybe she'll enjoy it. And she just messages back and she's like, why are all of these men talking? They're talking so much. And I was like, oh, it's like all of our show. Like all four of us are the host. She thought that I was like invited as a guest or something and that I was supposed to be presenting the information. And I was like, oh, no, it's also their show.
I love her though. That's amazing.
And she was like, oh, well then it was a very nice episode and very well researched. I enjoyed it. But Jen Big Nasty, to your point about they keep doing the same thing and it might look different as the technology changes and in different material conditions, et cetera. Part of this work of the ruling class to continue to sedate and anesthetize and oppress and immiserate us is to ensure that we can't see the patterns, right? This is why, for example, there can be people in the US who are happy to unionize their workplace, but are rooting for a regime change in Iran, or that are saying Nicolas Maduro is a dictator, or like whatever, things like that, right? And so the only way that you can shortcut this. There isn't a shortcut, right? Mal will tell you, unfortunately, listen, I ask every single fucking guest on our show, every single episode is like, what can we do to like learn this better? And they're all like, no, you actually just have to analyze things on a case by case basis. And I'm like, got me again. But if there's something that can consolidate some of this information, the only inoculation to the world just looking evil, chaotic, and random and leaving you helpless and in despair is understanding dialectical and historical materialism. For all of the people right now, because we have this great rise in anti-intellectualism, saying it's classist of me to suggest this, saying it's insufferable to tell people to read theory. Again, I want to remind people that reading theory was a foundational part of being a Black Panther. For example, to participate in the party, reading theory was not optional. You are making this up in your head, and many of the people who are making this critique have more degrees than I have. So the only way that the world stops looking overwhelming and confusing and unfathomable is dialectical and historical materialism. It is the only thing that unites all of these struggles. It is the only thing that explains everything. It is the only inoculation. You must understand it. By the way, friend of the pod, Luna Oi, and her beautiful, beautiful, beautiful husband, EJ, put out a translated work, 2 parts. You can get them at Banyan House. I'm not paid for saying this, but if you want to learn dialectical and historical materialism, you can read those. And I highly, highly recommend it. And the other thing that I really took away from this book, even though it's not one of the terrains of struggle that Rockhill explicitly states, it's just something that I think about a lot as somebody who was raised with an empire and no longer lives there and hasn't for some time. Part of the separation of everything, the atomization, individuation, itemization of all of us and everything in the world, is that people from within the imperial core truly have not been raised to understand foreign policy, right? At least in my lifetime, and I'm almost 40, both parties have had the same foreign policy my entire fucking life. There has been a pubic hair's distance between the two positions. You know what I'm saying? And not like a thick pube. It's a wispy guy, right? Of distance between their two positions. And the average US American doesn't understand that, doesn't understand when we, the proud, the few, the tanky, say that they are arguing for the same thing. They are serving the same class. They have the same policies. They just have slightly different ways that they want to get there and slightly different ways that they want to immiserate us. And I think that I wanted to say, you know, the violence that we are currently seeing, the escalated violence that we are currently seeing, for example, in Gaza, because right now there's a dozen of them, right? That it's no longer sort of like how Vietnam, at least in the eyes of the people within the imperial core, it's no longer a once in a generation. It's like 6 at one time kinds of events, but it's vitally important that we learn not only to learn within ourselves, but that we learn to effectively communicate this to other people, to the other people in our lives, even though we have a decentralized vanguard, like then we have to do our best to be that decentralized vanguard. And that means right now we have a comms problem. We are right. We are fucking right. I say it all the time. We're fucking right. We have the correct position. And if we can't convince people on that, then we have a comms problem, because how are we not convincing people of what is so obviously correct?
Yeah, no, you're right. And at least the three of us are all hot and make smart content. So that's got to count for something.
Tea.
Well, and we are not paid for the content that we make, but we, all of us, are richer for the conversation that we've had, for Rae, you coming on our show. Rae, as we're drawing to kind of a close here,
Don't
what do you
cry.
want to?
Don't cry because it's over.
Smile
Cry.
because it happened.
Yeah, that's what it is. I'm like,
Cry
cry
because
because you're here now.
Pessimism of the intellect, pessimism of the will.
Rae, once again, you want to plug ProlesPod. Is there anything else you're doing that you want people to know about? What's going on? Where can they engage with it?
I'm doing so many things. I don't want any of you to know about it. But definitely, you can find me at ProlesPod. Our Patreon is patreon.com/ProlesPod. You can get a bunch of free shit. You can get some paid shit. You know, stuff's coming, I guess.
Hell yeah.
Brilliant. Either of y'all, any last words on this? I mean, go read the book, y'all. It's dense, but like it is fascinating, and it does pick up. You will find yourself sailing through it quicker and quicker. But yeah, like y'all, anything we, any of us missed that y'all wanna that's burning a hole in your tongue.
I hope that in the second episode, the second volume, I guess is the word I'm looking for. I hope we get some more Trot bashing, and I hope we get some Chomsky bashing, and I'm looking forward to those two things.
We've got from page 145. Everything becomes saleable and purchasable. Circulation becomes the great social retort into which everything is thrown, to come out again as the money crystal. Nothing is immune from this alchemy. The bones of the saints cannot withstand it, let alone more delicate, res sacrosancte, consecrated objects beyond human commerce. Karl Marx. Mic drop, Carl.
Yes, go back and read theory, y'all. The good theory.
The real shit.
Look forward to part 2 of this. Whenever Rockhill drops this, however long it takes us to read that, we will see y'all there. Y'all take care.
Pages upon pages, words of wisdom from other workers' brow. Got my nose to the spine, nose soaking up.